That was Moment Musical or Moment Musical by Wolfgang Suppan. Wolfgang was born in 1966 in Vöcklabruck. He studied composition at the Musikhochschule in Vienna and attended further courses in Salzburg, Berlin, and also at IRCAM in Paris, an institute of Georges Pompidou organization dedicated to research of music and sound. Since 1997, Wolfgang has been a composition lecturer at the University for Music and Performing Arts in Vienna. Along with his intense involvement with computer-aided compositional forms, or CAC, and electroacoustic music, his interests include interdisciplinary, at time, even length projects involving film, dance, and literature. His numerous awards include Artist in Residence of the Berlin Artist Program, Fellowship of the Austrian Government or the Staatsstipendium for Composition, Residency at the Akademie Schloss Solitude in Stuttgart, Theodor Körner Prize, prize winner of the Casablanca Composition Competition Musikprotokolls, and the Stipendium of the Albanberg Stiftung. Wolfgang's pieces have been premiered or performed at places such as Vienna Konzerthaus, Mut Vienna, Wien Modern, Donaueschingen Music Days Festival, Festival Musikprotokoll in Graz, ORF Radio Kulturhaus in Vienna, Schauspielhaus Vienna, and Solitude Stuttgart. Wolfgang, thank you for being here. When we were discussing possible pieces of yours about which you would like to talk on the podcast, you mentioned that there are certain pieces which might not be others' favorites, but that they could be very close to your heart, you as the creator. And that's how we got to this piece. You said that such pieces are lighthouses in one's compositional history and forming. Can you explain why this particular piece is one of these lighthouses?
These lighthouses are the pieces I wrote in my past, and I'm lucky to have the opportunity to listening to my pieces from time to time, and especially when I start with a piece, I hold in for a second and think which direction or which new direction I can go, and sometimes it's helpful when you look back and you see in this piece you forced in this direction and you pick up this direction again and look if you have some new aspect to add and yeah, that's the starting point. Mostly technically, yeah, this lighthouse are a kind of orientation at the beginning with a new piece.
What year was this piece written?
This piece is written in 2001. It was a commission for the ensemble Die Reihe. Yeah, it's the instrumentation is between ensemble and orchestra. It's a little orchestra instrumentation. In the title I mentioned it's for orchestra or little orchestra.
At what point do you realize that this is like a lighthouse? So when it's finished and you listen to it, or is it like when you were developing it and the process of the development is that point of orientation for you?
Yeah, I have some main topics and so like for this lighthouse, the piece I suggest to you, the Moment Musical, have some aspects like of formal development or how I use the microtonality. It was interesting in to go back to this point and see what happens when I start from the idea I had in 2000 when I worked on this piece.
How long did it take you to develop the piece?
I think it was half a year. For this, developed some special kind of chord treatments. I used the idea of a chord is like a construction which breaks, and what you hear in this piece is like a destroying process. From this calculations, also the microtonal comes in, so that means you don't have very scaled, clean breaks, so you have microtonal edges and bumps. After this piece, I didn't continue with this idea of calculation of breaking construction chords. But when I listened to the piece again, I found this is what comes out was for me interesting experience, because this is the interesting point, what kind of music comes out from this idea. I remember also that I expected a little bit something different results, but this is also an experience when I worked with orchestra and comparing to ensembles, that when you work with ensembles and then you switch to orchestra, you imagine the sound will explode much more in dynamical sides and colors. And so I remember I was sometimes a little bit disappointed from the orchestra.
When it was finished back then, well, you liked it definitely in a way. And now that you listen to it, how do you listen? Is it different? Is it like looking at yourself as another creator? Because now you've changed probably a lot.
Yeah, that's the point. What I really like, it's when you look at the photography of yourself, you are so influenced from different thoughts and ideas and reflections, and with the time distance, you have another view to yourself, and this is also when I'm listening to pieces I've done before. I can hear the music I did in another way. When you work on a piece, I have some expectations. So randomly, something else come up, and if you're too focused on one direction, so you maybe you recognize these other aspects, but you don't pick it up and develop it. When I listen from a time distance, so I see more directions.
You mentioned that the whole idea was to have chords and then to destroy these chords in a certain way. Would you say that you generally have a whole logic or algorithm for your pieces? Do you consider yourself like a serialist?
No, I'm not a serialist, but I really love the music from the 50s. What I'm really interested in is different thoughts, how you develop music, and I'm a big fan of Middle Age music. And in this time period, the mathematic music, astronomy and geometry are very close, and this was an experience I really like, and I also like the idea of algorithmic concepts, but I'm not at all interested in algorithmic music. So this is a difference. So I tried to understand the theoretical aspects, but I don't want to have it too much on the surface. So I'm not an algorithmic composer, but I really like the mathematical concepts. And going back to serialism, there's a big misunderstanding of this time period. So automatism is replacing the concept of an author and what you're able to do in this music field, and when you use these technical aspects, mathematical aspects, that it doesn't replace the emotional or the music itself. When I listen to this music, I feel that emotions are not in the music itself. It's in me and not in the music.
Well, what's interesting for me is the balance between emotions and these so-called algorithms. I understand that this algorithm is like a background thing for you, probably as a help to develop the form. But I'm also curious to know, like, if the rules are so present in creating the piece, then how do you still try to have emotions in it?
So my opinion is that I work on working procedures. That's the meaning of algorithm, and I don't work on emotions. So the emotions are for me in the process at the end, when the music comes to our ears and our brain, but I cannot work on emotions. That's for me not a topic in the compositorial process. But I really like to have emotions when I listen to music. So it's not a contradictory.
So when you create a piece, like with a certain set of rules or algorithms, without feelings, and then you listen to the piece you created, you have certain feelings towards the piece you're hearing, right? Is that what you mean?
No, the feelings. I leave it on the audience side. Also, when I mentioned before the Middle Age music, on one side it's very rare and limited. On the other side, it's rich and full and opens a huge palette of emotions and imaginations. And aspect of using algorithms is to have more possibilities to develop things and explore things. Also, on this listening side.
So this brings me also to the next question. The algorithm is something for you as the composer, or do you also try to make it audible for the audience?
It's really something for me. It's how you organize the work. It's very simple. You're sitting on a desk and think about music in different ways, and the algorithm is like to organize yourself to come to a result that maybe brings out things you cannot control. So algorithm is for me the opposite of control. When you think about the history in the 20th century with serialism, that on one point the serialism meets the random choice concepts, and the composer recognized how close random and serialism can be, and that's for me interesting point, that creativity is based on little steps, possibilities, and the combination of these little steps, like in an algorithm, brings out a huge variety of combinations of experience in music. So this is the concept.
I understand. You know, it reminds me of the motets we used to write at the university. Yeah, so the motets we had to write at the university, we had like limited options, especially in the earlier like Gattungen, that we only could have certain notes above certain notes. So my question is, with that limitation, how much space is there left for creativity? You know, if you're like developing a machine which has certain inputs and certain outputs, then what's your role as the creator? Do you rule out certain outcomes, or is your work as the creator creating the system or the algorithm?
When we speak about the motets writing, at the beginning you just see the rules, but there is also a term of dancing in chains. Yeah. Nietzsche was using this term, dancing in chains, because when you have this concept of freedom, you very soon recognize that this freedom is like a pseudo freedom, and when you have a very special sets of rules, it helps you to be more freely. So when I use this kind of machine, it's like a vehicle of you moving in different directions, and it's not the machine that rules over you. So I rule the machine, and I developed a set of rules. So it's not a simple machine that you can predict what comes out. For me, it's interesting when I work on this so-called machine, that you are surprised what comes out, and you don't you can do predictions. So this is very important, that you when you listen to music, for instance, the classical sonata form, it's a form you think, okay, this after the exposition you are tired of the rest, because I guess Mahler said it, that sonata is after the exposition is not very interesting, but when you listen to the great pieces of this time period, you also are surprised in this process. Even you have the reprise and development of themes, and so this is also a very interesting point in music, using repetition or because the time makes it different. Like it's not the same when you have the theme 20 bars later. It can be a different functionality inside the piece.
What was interesting for you in the contemporary music scene? The distorted sounds or the atonality, or what grasped you?
Oh, good question. So I come from both sides. One was the improvisation. Very early I started with improvisation on keyboard instruments, and the second path was the it was kind of chronological developing of classic music. So I start with classic Baroque music towards romantic, and then early 20th century, and then also this first path with improvisation comes to the 20th century. So yeah, for me it comes very naturally to this contemporary music field.
Did you have any influential composers or artists that like made you go through algorithmic music or the way you compose today?
Yeah, what I remember, because at a certain point I was really into jazz music, and at some point I recognized this, maybe because jazz is so splitted up in so many aspects, that I found the combination of emotions and what improvisations can do. I recognize that when you have in a compositorial process with algorithms, so the results for me more interesting.
And that makes me curious to know, when you're listening to music, to their music, for example, or to other algorithmic composer musics, do you also listen to the relations or their system or the algorithm behind the piece? Do you try to hear that, or do you like naturally hear that? Do you even look for it?
Yeah, one of the first and impressive moments was the music of Xenakis. Till now, I'm fascinating about this both sides, the emotional and the mathematical aspect of his music. So it's also a kind of lighthouse, a personal lighthouse. This, because when you listen to the music of Xenakis, you explore yourself in a really fascinating way, and this music is not thinkable without this mathematical sides. And yeah, also later Stockhausen was an influence for me. So these two composers, Xenakis and Stockhausen, two names I would mention.
You know that there's a logic behind Xenakis' piece. So when you're listening to him, do you try to hear this logic?
No, it's the first step is you experience, you listen to some music and think, what is it? It blows my mind. And the second step is I'd like to know more about what it is. It's not about to hack the code. So to know what's going on, it's you're so fascinated from experience that you like to get more information about in which context is this music placed.
If we would go back a little bit to Momo musical, Moment musical, uh, Well, until now, we tried to discuss pieces with composers with smaller groups of musicians because performing a piece with small ensembles or soloists can be more intense and intimate, and therefore possibly more exchanging. I was curious, though, to know whether this is also possible with a big orchestra. Could you explain how you developed the piece with the orchestra, whether you talk directly to the musicians or to the conductor?
No, unfortunately, there was no space for exchange at the beginning. My experience with orchestra or with larger groups is that you're very limited to make the machine running. When some errors in the parts or in the score, you have to fix it very fast, because when 50 people on stage and something is not very clear, or there's some misunderstood, so there's no much time to exchange and to discuss. It's yeah, you have to be very at the point when a question comes up. Certain part of the score, do you want it this way or this way, and you have to be very focused in keep it running, and not. My intention is when it comes to such aspects of decisions, I say, okay, let's sleep one night, and tomorrow I give you an answer. So this is very horrible for the ensembles, because the answer should come in 1 second, not in 24 hours.
So how is that? Do you talk to the conductor? I mean, or before, or does he talk to you, or do you talk directly to the musicians?
Yeah, of course. In each ensemble is, for instance, the percussion players, they need some more information about which instruments they should choose for cymbals or drums. I remember when I worked with larger groups or orchestras that you have these certain moments of connection with single personalities, because they are interesting in what you are doing, and this moments gives you the feeling you're not in a lion cage. Because sometimes you are like in a lion cage, and yeah, even in larger groups you can have these little moments of context and little questions, and when these little questions comes, you have this impression, okay, there's something also interesting for the musicians. When no questions come, you think, oh, it can be okay or not okay. So, but it's more a ghost situation.
Well, there are certainly different attitudes towards how to get what you want from a group of musicians. Some might be more flexible in terms of fitting their work so that it's more performable by those who are performing it, and others prefer to take their time and take as close as possible to their initial idea without changing it. How would you say you usually worked in that term? Do you try to like make it possible for people to play, or do you try to concentrate on getting what you want out of it?
It's not easy to answer, because you want that people can perform with which idea you notated. But at some moments you are surprised that for the musicians is it very uncomfortable. At some point you don't know, is it aesthetically, because sometimes the problems came up because the musician don't like the results, and
Then what do you do? Then do you try to convince them that the result is what you want? Or do you like feel, okay, then let's try it like another way if the person doesn't like the result?
yeah. How I deal with this topic is that when I sit on a piece, and I have one passage in the piece, and I think I'm not sure, there is a a safe version and a not unsafe version. So I try to when I know the ensembles, the musician, I took the unsafe version and say, okay, when we at the rehearsal, we can discuss about it. And even artistically, it's more interesting to take some risk. When you write for an orchestra, it's a difficult decision, because do you really want to take the risk that when you don't know the single musicians, how much basis to discuss? Or so I'm on this. I'm only on the. I like the unsafe situation, because like the whole composition process is an unsafe procedure, and you cannot be sure about all aspects. And even when you have this notation apps with the MIDI play option, you don't know what happens and which direction the music. You always choose the safe version, but it's also a experience that you can have amount of unsafe decisions. So you cannot have 100% unsafe decisions. So this would be very risky for the whole project. But when you say 80% is somehow safe and 20% is unsafe, yeah, maybe it is a good cocktail for the rehearsals to have also the possibilities to discuss and to explore some aspects.
So, what is the unsafest version or composition that you have ever done?
Oh, good question. I don't, I don't know.
Or let's say someone you felt so comfortable with, or a group that you were like, I can explore or experience anything with these people and they would be up for it.
So even when I'm very unsecure how it will go, but when I work 2 years on a piece, I say to myself, okay, I don't know what exactly will happen in the rehearsal, but I spent so much time that the quality of thoughts is good. Maybe this is the point, that when you fail on a high level, it's for everyone much more interesting. And when you have done a piece in very little time, and so the failing can be on a very low level. So this is not very. So everyone wants to fail on a higher level, because failing is part of our nature, and it's also combined with the time you spend on the work. And I also remember some works that I did in the past. Afterwards, I thought, okay, I didn't spend so much time for this piece, and the risk I took was too much, and so the failing was also then on a lower level.
What's the longest you have spent for writing a piece?
Yeah, it depends what you define on spending on a piece, because
Like 2 years is quite a long time, I would say.
the longest composition process itself, I would say half a year.
Well, you teach also composition. I studied with you. And how do you work with students? How do you help them develop their pieces? Do you encourage them to also have a certain logic for their pieces? This like on a hidden level algorithm or system? Or do you also inspire more experimental approaches, such as composing, just as going along?
This algorithm side I really hide totally when I teach. So I never show this computer apps I use and programming. I remember sometimes when the students come and he needs some help, I write a little program. But it's really a rare situation. So I really hide this side of myself when I teach. So because don't want to force anyone to go to this direction. So if someone is interesting to know more about, maybe I would give more information, but
Yeah, well, I was definitely more interested personally, and I remember that we did quite a lot in that respect, and it actually kind of helped me because for me, it was hard to like have an overview of a piece, and I don't know, like this having an organized way of thinking, because I'm such a chaotic person, really helped me to have an idea about the beginning, have an end of the piece, and then be creative in that.
That's also a very interesting experience in teaching. That when you're so-called chaotic or emotionally you are in a struggle, these rule sets can save your life or bring you to a point to finish a piece. And and on the other sides, I don't mention any colleagues' names. I have the impression that they are so organized that they don't need additional rules to compose. So they really can improve, kind of do improvisation, because the personality itself is full of set of rules. So so this is for every person is different, and I feel I have this also this chaotic situation inside of me, and this algorithms sides also helped me a lot in finishing pieces and developing interesting directions.
We also had composition seminars, in which you like chose some pieces and you showed us those pieces. How did you choose those pieces? Like every time.
Yeah, I don't have a fixed program of pieces. Normally I do a mixture of pieces I recognize it's good to present, and that it's helpful for students, and the second thing is that from the teaching single lessons I mention some piece that the students don't know or know a little bit, and they say, okay, let's listen to it at the seminar and share it with the other students, and so I like this improvisation moment when I collecting the pieces for the seminars, and I have a huge collection of scores and recordings, and I also like to change the sets of pieces. It's also based on the interests. Of course, I have some pieces I adore. So it's a mixture of my side, and it comes up when I teach and when I ask about, do you know this piece or this piece, and then I come to a collection of pieces that we listen together, analyzed in the seminar.
As a final question, do you have any words of wisdom for those in the beginning of their way? Are there certain things that you would suggest one could do to be able to survive as a contemporary composer?
It's not an easy question, because so every generation have the opportunity to have their own experience. So, but what I recognize is one of the most important things is the social aspect. And so my suggestions would be go out, ask people questions, join other colleagues, found ensembles, found concert series, and be part of a group, because this composing process have also the sides that you get isolated. And when you are isolated, you can be the best composer in the world, but no one would touch by it when you hide it, or when you hide yourself in a small chamber. And so what I recognize is the most important tool is to go out and yeah, be part of discourses of what's going on in music or society generally. So that's my suggested B.
Wolfgang, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much.